All right, so functions. Okay, basically with functions, you have a couple of things. Okay, so with the function, what we'll have is we'll have inputs, and inputs are basically the numbers that go into the function. And I'm going to use this symbol. This symbol right here means function. Okay, so these are the numbers that go into the function. All right, so these are your inputs. We also have outputs. All right, these are the numbers that come out of the function. Okay, these are basically your solutions or your answers. Okay, so you have inputs and outputs. All right, now next to outputs in parentheses, I want you to write a y, and next to inputs, I want you to write an x. Because on a coordinate point, it's like x, y. Okay, so your inputs are your x values, your outputs are your y values. All right. And the last part of a function, okay, we're going to call this our function rule. Okay, function rule. Your function rule, this is basically your equation. Okay, your function rule is your equation. Okay, so we got three parts of a function here: your inputs, your outputs, your function rule. That's basically your equation. Okay, that's what that means. So when we see a function, what's a function look like? Okay, we're going to do an example. Okay, and your example is going to your problem will say something like this. Say f of x equals x plus 7. It'll have a semicolon when x equals 4. All right. Now, here's what that means. Okay. Your f of x, that's your function. Okay. So we're going to identify the parts of this function. This part right here, that's your function rule. Okay. So that's my function rule. This right here, this is telling me what x equals. Okay. So x equals 4. This is my input. This is what I'm inputting into this function. How do I know that? Because x equals 4. Another word for equals is is. What's x? X is 4. So it would go there. And this part here, this is going to be your output. Whatever our answer is going to be the output. Okay? So this is basically saying f of x. Okay? So it's f of 4, because my 4 would be my x, and I would sub that in. All right? So when we solve this, this is just asking, okay, x plus 7. Well, what's the answer when x is 4? That's all it's saying. So when I write this, I put my parenthesis here to show substitution. Plus 7. What goes in here? A 4, because x is 4. Okay? And sometimes you'll see it written like this. F of 4. And that'll also tell me that, hey, x is 4. Okay? So then we just solve it. 4 plus 7 is 11. So then my f of x equals 11. Okay, so the answer is, what is f of x, which is x plus 7, when x is 4? My answer is 11. So it basically says when x is 4, your function equals 11. And if that was a coordinate point, we would write it like this. It would be 4, because 4 is my x, comma, my f of x is my output, which is my y, 11. That's what that point would be if I was to plot that on a graph. let's look at another one. Now, it may not always be f of x, okay? Sometimes they'll have g of x or k of x or j of x, whatever it may be. Just know that if you have a letter parenthesis with an x, that represents function, okay? So I'm going to write this one a little differently. I might say something like this. G of 9 equals negative 4x plus 2. So you may look at this and say, what is this asking? Okay, so basically what this is asking is, this is saying, what is the solution to the function rule when x equals 9? That's what it's asking, okay? I know this looks confusing, but all it's saying is, okay, take this 9, plug it in for x, and tell me what this equals. We're just substituting and solving. That's all we're doing here. All right, and again, I'm going to let green represent my input so we can visually see that. All right, so equals, I'm going to use my parentheses, negative 4, there's an x, but parentheses, plus 2. What goes inside those parentheses? This right here, 9. So we'll sub a 9 in there. We're substituting and solving. That's all we're doing with functions. Equals, negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. And then negative 36 plus 2 is negative 34. And that is what g of 9 would equal. Okay, negative 34. That would be my answer. You're just substituting and solving. That's all you're doing. Okay. Now, another way you'll see this, okay, you'll see something that's called a function table. All right, so a function table. So what does a function table look like? Well, with a function table, you're going to have inputs, and the middle is going to be our function rule. And then the last, not the last, then we'll have our outputs. And then we will have our points. Okay. So function table. Function table, you have 4 parts. All right. So the reasoning for a function table is it may say graph this function. Okay. So if we were to graph a function, we would use a function table. All right. So here's our example to our function table. Let's say f of x, and we'll do kind of an easy one, equals x minus 3. All right. Now, a lot of times it won't give you your inputs. Okay. It'll just say this and say make a function table. We can make up inputs because all you're asked to do is to graph it. All right. But for this example, we'll use some easy inputs. So we'll say we'll use 4 points here. We'll go negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. So here's what this is asking me. We're going to fill out this function table using these inputs. All right. So my function rule, this is where your rule is going to go. Your function rule is just x minus 3. All right. So for my function rule here, I know it's x minus 3. So parentheses minus 3. What goes in those parentheses? Negative 1. What's negative 1 minus 3? It's going to give me negative 4. That's my output. So what's my point going to be down here? Remember what your x is. Your inputs is your x. Your outputs, remember, this is your y. So my coordinate point for this example would be negative 1, comma, -4. That's one coordinate point. We would do the same for all three of these. So then my next one here, parentheses -3. What goes in these parentheses? My input, which is 0. 0 minus 3 is -3, which means my coordinate point is going to be 0, comma, -3. That's another point. And we would do the same for all of these. So now I would have parentheses -3. What goes in those parentheses? My input. 1 minus 3 is -2. And my coordinate point would just be 1, comma, -2. And then our last one here, sub in my 2. 2 minus 3, -1. And then my coordinate point would just be 2, comma, -1. So then you would take those 4 points, put them on a graph, and you would graph them. So you'd use a function table to graph your function. Okay? So your inputs would go here. Your work for your function rule, so say if you had a function rule that might have been 2x minus 3, you would just solve that inside of here. Okay? And then whatever it's solved for is your output. So these two are your coordinate points on a graph. Okay? So with functions, think of functions like a machine. Okay? Kind of like a machine. So don't make fun of my artwork. So let's say we got this machine here. Give it a little tower because he's puffing smoke out there because he's working real hard. Okay? Your inputs would be here. They would go into the machine. Inside the machine is your function rule. So it's working inside this machine, okay, building whatever it is it's building, okay? And then when it pumps out the final answer, that is your output, okay? And everything is just working in this direction. So you pump your input in, it works inside the machine, and then you get your finished product, okay? That's kind of how a function works. It's just an input, solve it, and an output. You're just substituting and solving. Plug and chug. That's all we're doing. All right.